Hi, and welcome to Freshwaves. I'm your host, Bren Masson, and today we are really privileged to be speaking with Sue Reynolds, author, AWA facilitator extraordinaire, and psychotherapist. Joining us also will be Heidi Croot, who has been writing with Sue for many, many years and is now writing her memoir. Today, we will be talking about memoirs and memoir writing. Sue and Heidi, welcome to Freshwaves.
Thanks, Brenda. Glad to be here.
So, Sue, tell us a little bit about your background. You're an author, AWA facilitator extraordinaire, in my view, and a psychotherapist as well.
Correct. Yeah, thanks for the extraordinaire, Brenda. I've been an AWA facilitator since 2002, although I was leading writing workshops before that, but becoming certified in the AWA method transformed the way I led workshops. And being a psychotherapist, I actually feel that leading writing workshops and being a psychotherapist are kind of two sides of the same coin. When we get into our stories, whether they be imagined or from memory, we're examining so much of our material. So it often leads to insight.
I kind of agree with you on that. I think the psychotherapy thing is just, it's an amazing addition. I'm an expressive arts practitioner, so I also see two sides of a lot of the coins. Mm-hmm. And you do different workshops. So the workshops are not all the same sort of basic AWA kind of workshops. You actually branch off into some very specific workshops, and the one that we're speaking about today is memoirs. Tell us a little bit about memoir.
So actually, until for many years now, since 2009, I've been leading year-long workshops where people produce a full-length manuscript of a novel or, whatever project it is they want to work on. But as time went on, and as I worked with more and more memoirists, and as I, became certified as a psychotherapist and moved more deeply into that career, last year I made the decision that I in that year-long course, I'm only interested in working with nonfiction. And so two of the courses I taught this year were memoir, and one of them was shorter pieces. But I love memoir. I love working with memoirists on that long way. I love what happens for people when they spend a year writing about a certain transformative time in their lives. I've had many memoirists say to me some version of, I've been doing therapy for years, but spending this time on my memoir was the most therapeutic thing I've ever done.
I've heard similar things from Dr. Vanderkolk. He does a lot of studies about trauma. And he has great success with writing. And he is the one who actually says that in order for a brain to heal and perform at its optimum, you must learn to play and create freely.
You're talking about Besser Vanderkolk?
Yes, and when you look at that, it's a wonderful way of approaching writing as a creative method of being able to let yourself create, to write, to express,
exactly.
right?
To play.
Yeah.
For sure.
So Heidi, you've been with Sue as a facilitator for 5 years doing memoir.
Yes, I have, and it's been one of the most remarkable experiences of my life. I could feel my heart pick up just as she was describing how it worked. Sue knows every element of my story and led me up. By the time I was finished the year-long program, which turned into another year and then another year, I had a manuscript, and I had worlds of wisdom from Sue on. She explained myself to myself and to the rest of us many times. It's really remarkable.
I'm just going to butt in here and do a bit of a disclaimer there, because I believe it's the work of writing memoir itself that leads to the insight. Heidi's very kind to give me the credit, but she did the work. She gained the insights. She, plumbed to the depths. So, yeah, it's kind of you, Heidi, but really, it was your accomplishment.
Okay, and so, Sue, what is the difference between a memoir or memoir writing and journal writing? Is journals just meant for you and memoirs are meant for the world?
You know what? If you're cool with it, I'd actually love to turn this over to Heidi, who is a lifetime journaler, and then has done 5 years. She's been concentrating on her memoir and journaling at the same time. So maybe we'll let the practicer answer first, and then I can give you a I don't know, a bird's eye view or something.
Okay, Heidi, take it away.
I'd be glad to. Yes, I have been journaling for decades. I see journaling as the raw material for the memoir. When you're journaling, you're dealing in the present moment with what's happening. You're dealing with issues that come up, and you're exploring them. And as Sue said, you're going deep. And epiphanies arise from that, and you take that material, and that is the raw material that you use for building a memoir. And without that, I don't know how people do it without journaling, actually. I know that they do. But I've filled thousands of pages of journal binders, journal books with ideas and thoughts, and holding my feet to the fire and trying to explore what just happened here. And the best thing was digging deeper on other people's rationale for the things they were doing. It was transformative in that way, because I stopped seeing things in a one-dimensional way and was able to get in other shoes, sometimes to my chagrin. always with an amazing feeling of transformation.
So when you started on this memoir journey, did you start writing just key things out of your journals?
Actually, the way it started was with a woman called Barbara Turner-Veselago. She was leading free fall workshops, and her method was sit in quiet in a room and follow the thread of an idea or a sensation and write about it. And it took me a while to step out of my corporate communication background and learn how to let go like that. My method was always to plan and plot before I took the pen in hand, but I finally did figure out what she was trying to get us to do, and I would sit there in that room, and I don't know how to explain it. Sue will totally understand this, but it's like an invisible hand takes over your pen. And so fragments of my memoir came up in those sessions. And then what happened was I finally built up a critical mass of material. And then it was Sue that I came to after that, and was able to build those fragments into something whole.
So have you taken one aspect of your life for the memoir, or is it the story of your life?
I would say that the story of a life is more of a autobiography, and memoir is a patch of time in your life that you are exploring for the puzzlement of it. Something has happened, and you need to figure out what that is and make sense of it. So what I did was try to make sense of a difficult relationship with my parents.
And then is this something that you had you planned on this being something that you would share with others?
Not initially. It was only when I reached that critical mass of first drafts when all of a sudden I got a poke in the ribs and had the idea that this is taking shape into a narrative, and that's where I got the encouragement and the skills I needed with Sue to turn that into something that had a shape of memoir, a narrative arc that went from being a total idiot at the beginning to figuring things out at the end.
Oh, I'm so glad that both of you laughed, and I wasn't the only one.
That is not how I would characterize Heidi's memoir. Oh, funny.
So, Sue, how does that resonate with you?
Going back to the original question about journaling and memoir?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, well, Brenda, you were saying you're an expressive arts practitioner, and for me, journaling is much more towards that end. I loved what Heidi said about it's, sort of grappling with current events, right? Things that are happening right now, trying to understand what's going on in your life. Mm-hmm. For myself, I would say that I don't normally return to my journals. I too am an inveterate journaler, but I don't normally return to my journals as I'm writing something. I might check in with them later. I've written a couple of autobiographically based, memoir short stories based on my memory of events. And interestingly, when I've gone back and looked at the journals I wrote at the time, key details have been melded a little bit. They've been molded, and what I wrote in the story is not exactly what happened, but it actually made it, my brain has turned it into literature. My brain has composted it and brought sort of certain themes to the fore, or substituted details that would support a particular kind of metaphor or theme more than just writing it straight the way it was. So it was fascinating to me to see how that had morphed.
Do you think that happens often in memoir?
I don't know about memoir. I can tell you that that memory is plastic, right?
Right.
I remember in my final year of my psych degree, I went to a psychology, like a student trade show where we were all presenting our theses and so on. And I watched this fabulous presentation by a couple of young thesis students who had influenced people's memories. They'd gone to people and had shared, taken like some life history details from them, and then they had included some things that their families had told them about that person's life. And then they included a few false details, like the time that your teddy bear got left at the beach and your parents were halfway home in the car and you insisted and you had to go back and get the bear, which had never happened. And the person said, no, I don't remember that. And then they interviewed them again, I forget what, 3 months later, and the person then swore that event had happened.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So Heidi,
I don't know whether I think I got off your original question.
No,
there,
but it's absolutely fine. I mean, it's becoming more apparent the difference between journaling and memoir, and I think the two terms get confused quite often.
Yeah, memoir is definitely writing about a time period from your life before now, and it's I like to think that it's organized around a challenging and transformative time in your life. Something you're wrestling with, something you're trying to understand. Certainly, as a memoirist, it should be something that you're wrestling with and trying to understand. A big question you have about your life, a situation that feels unresolved, a place in your heart. I'm paraphrasing Margaret Atwood here, but a place in your heart where there's a knot, right? And you're trying to untangle that knot through the act of writing your memoir.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a nice analogy. So Heidi, is that how it felt for you?
Yes, absolutely. And I would just add that that for me, I too would go to the page without my journal open. I would not have my journal open beside me and transcribe or do anything like that. No, you start from the deep well within. And what I use my journals for after, as Sue says she has done, is to go back and double check some facts. And I was able to grab authentic dialogue because I had reported it in my journal. So I was using it as a way to augment truth and and to report on situations in as accurate a way as I could. That's what I used them for.
Now, when you go to a normal, and I use that word loosely, a regular AWA workshop, you get a prompt, you write for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever the timing is, and then people are invited to share what they have written or not as they choose, and then you have another prompt, and it can be totally unrelated to the first prompt, and you write for another designated period of time, and then you share. Is that how a memoir workshop is facilitated?
So I'm going to say that it depends on the length of time of the workshops. So, for instance, for the Right Around the World program, which just ended, that's the AWA's big fundraiser every May, I taught a 3-hour workshop called Time Travel. And for it, I just used some of the most effective prompts I know from writing memoir. But there was so people were dipping in and writing things from their past, but there wasn't an ambition to, create a finished piece of literature, obviously, in a 3-hour workshop, right? Mm-hmm. But in a year-long workshop, where the stated aim at the beginning is to create a full-length memoir manuscript, throughout the year, every class, every workshop that I lead, I offer a small lesson plan at the beginning intended to illustrate something important to know about the craft of writing memoir. And it's targeted from getting an understanding of what memoir is and getting an understanding of what each writer's deep question is at the beginning of the year to, by the end of the year, they're getting near the end of the story. They've figured out what the story is, because most people come into memoir not really having an idea of exactly what it is they want to write. They know they want to write about their lives, but they don't really have an understanding yet of what the transformative period of their life has been. And, they might write something that goes over 30 years, but memoir is usually around a much shorter period, although it will pull things in from earlier influencing factors. So, to answer your question, because I'm ranging all over the place again, if you're in a long-term memoir workshop, you'll be offered prompts, but they'll be different kinds of prompts. So, for instance, we're almost at the end of the year here. One of my prompts a couple of months ago was think about who your narrator, who that younger version of yourself has become after this story is over. Because that speaks to the transformation that's happened, right? How are they different from who they were as the story began? And, write for 20 minutes about that. And I might even offer them a sentence stem. But so that would be the kind of targeted prompt, getting at a certain kind of information about the memoir.
A year is a long time to commit to a workshop. That's more like classes.
How about 5 years, right, Heidi?
That's right. We loved it so much we kept going.
You must get awfully close with the people that you're writing with. I mean, you'll know so much about them and so much intensity about certain aspects of their lives.
It's true. It does work that way. A lot of us are very close friends.
And you didn't start out that way, or did you know the people going into this?
I only knew Sue.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Now, how big are the classes? A maximum for the year long. It's a maximum of eight people. But on Zoom this year, in person was a maximum of 8. I started out in Zoom this year with a maximum of 7, and for one reason or another, in each of the classes, someone had to drop out, and I think I'm going to stick with 6 next year because it is such a lovely number. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I will echo what Heidi said, that over the course of a year together, and especially over the course of more than a year together, I think that, well, you've probably witnessed this, Brenda, is that people can be more truthful in a writing group than they can be with their family and friends.
Absolutely.
They can say the truest thing and not have an agenda about how their writing group feels, how they're going to react, especially in an AWA workshop, because their writing is held in such a tender, a positive way that I think, for some people that might be the first kind of taste they have of that kind of unconditional warmth.
Mm-hmm. It feels so safe.
Mm.
It really does have that feeling of safety. The intentions are set at the beginning. Everyone knows where they stand. There's no judgment. There's not, you wrote this. It's the narrator and the different language that's used. And I think it creates a lovely, lovely, safe space.
Mm. I would agree with that.
Absolutely does. And that's what is needed for the book to take off. If you're feeling that you have to take shelter all the time, or that you have to be careful all the time, or you're afraid of judgment, you've become small. And what you need to be is to be as big as you can.
It's funny, once you start doing a lot of AWA workshops and you get comfortable with it, you expect that the rest of the world knows how to deal with the things, just like the other people in the AWA. And I once sent a piece that I was really, really, really proud of to a friend, and I'm waiting with anticipation, waiting for her response. She rewrote the entire piece and sent it back to me.
Oh, no.
Painful.
Oh, and I realized at that moment, oh, no, she's never done it. Actually, she had done an AWA, but must have forgotten.
Wow.
I thought,
right.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, the world is not like AWA workshops. And now I keep my stuff to my AWA workshops. It takes me a few minutes, and knowing the right people now, if I'm going to share anything outside of that wonderful safe space.
Yeah, I actually want to say something about that, because, there is space in AWA workshops to get more constructive feedback. But in the initial AWA workshops where you're writing on the spot and you've just created something brand new and fresh, when your work is offered, we're only going to talk about what's strong in it, right? What's already working. Mm-hmm. But then, as a writer, you might want to prepare a piece to get ready to go to the CBC or something, to go to a contest, or for submission, to a very discerning magazine. So at that point, you do want it to have an editor's eye cast over it. You do want it to be the best it can be. Mm-hmm. So a lot of AWA workshops also have that component for, you can put in your work that you have taken as far as you can, and now you need new eyes on it. But even that we hold very tenderly, right? We talk first about what's already working, and we talk about, okay, in your opinion, what might make the piece stronger? That's always how we come to it, and there's none of this MFA, tear it to shreds, stomp on it till it's bleeding.
Yeah, no. I've never found anything good to come of that kind of attitude.
I think usually the writer is so traumatized that, so I'll just give you a little tiny taste. I've been working with a client. She's writing a mid-grade book, wonderful, kind of fantastic, full of children's literature references. It is a marvelous project. And she just, and I was working with her, and it was first draft, so I was offering her lots of encouragement. And at the end of the first draft, she sent it off to an agent. And I didn't hear from her for a long, long, long time. And then I reached out a couple of weeks ago and just said, hey, I miss you. I miss Alice. How's it going? And she scheduled a session with me right away and said, she said the agent was absolutely brutal. And she said, I haven't been able to look at it. Now, she did send it off as a first draft and not a second draft, which is which was probably an error in judgment. But that's the thing, right? When you get that harsh critiquing, you just think, oh, this is worthless. It's never going to find a home. It sucks. And you just don't have the energy to even face it again, unless you've got an absolutely incredible sense of confidence of yourself as a writer.
Mm-hmm. Or on the other hand, you don't care at all. So, oh well, and just keep going and doing whatever you were going to do. I found that there's two sides of that fence.
I know very few writers like that, though. They're usually they're crushed if the critiquing is too harsh.
Yeah, it can be a really mean world, can't it?
Yes.
So, Heidi, how do you deal with that if you're writing memoir? I mean, you've been spending 5 years. This is your life. Could you ever be brave enough to send it out to have someone else say, yeah, well, we're not really interested. It's a nice story, but not for us. No, we're not publishing that at this time. Thanks for trying.
Oh, geez. You have to be geared for some of that. You have to be geared for that kind of rejection, and having grown up in the corporate environment, I had a lot of feedback, and I feel as though my skin is pretty tough, but it's different because, of course, memoir is personal. So, yeah, I don't know how I'll handle it. I think with as much professionalism as I can. I've been working on an essay for years. I'm just starting now to put some finishing touches to it, and I think I've had tons of feedback on it I belong to 3 different writers groups, and I've had feedback from all 3. I've had feedback from my husband, and I keep tinkering with it and changing it. It's changed so dramatically since when I first started it. And, I love that process. I love editing. I love seeing how it shifts and changes with new inputs and new epiphanies. And so I'm okay with that whole thing.
I'm sure it was a process to get to being okay with that whole thing. And we'll talk about that when we get back from our little break. You're listening to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. Today we're talking with Sue Reynolds and Heidi Croot. We'll be back right after this, so stay tuned. You're listening to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. Remember, if you'd like to hear this show again, you can go to freshwaves.ca, or you can check out our YouTube channel at Freshwaves Radio. Capital F, capital R for radio. Now let's get back to the show. We're back on Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. Today we're talking with Heidi and Sue. We're talking about writing and writing memoir. Now, Heidi, you've been working on yours for 5 years. You say that you have a bit of a tough skin from working in the corporate world, and I can understand that. I did a lot of writing as well in the corporate world and a lot of video presentations, and, they'd say, nah, we don't like that. We want more of this, more of that, and I'd go back and change it, and, they're paying me to sit and do another 10 hours of editing, and I'm perfectly fine with that. When it's my own stuff, I have a little different attitude. And I think it takes a really brave person to venture out there and, put their head out there to get potentially chopped off. So how do you deal with that? Do you think you're better equipped now that you've spent 5 years on it, or even more vulnerable now that you've spent 5 years delving into your memoir?
The rewards are so great, though. That's what I would say to that. The rewards of continuing to work away on it and sitting with a group of women who are so insightful and who know part of your story or almost all of your story, and they see things that you don't see yourself, that I did not see myself. How many times have I sat around Sue's table and had Sue or someone else say, how interesting about XYZ, and bring forward something I had never thought of, and it's my family and my situation we're talking about. So it's palm to forehead, right, over and over again. So and then of course after you get that epiphany, you shift the story to encompass that new understanding. I tell you, it's magic. It is magic.
So that you found it very liberating?
Yes, liberating. When you go into writing memoir, it's all about discovery. And so any feedback you get that adds to the discovery is a celebration, something that you want. you don't want to go around like a whirlpool down the drain on one idea and have it stick like that. You're in this game for self-discovery.
So when you were new to memoir, did you research other people's memoir, or did you just realize that you had a story to tell and you wanted to tell your story?
I think it's probably both. I've always read memoir. I've always been fascinated by memoir and other people's stories and how they cope and deal with things and emerge from things. It was only, though, after I had written enough short pieces and had a critical mass that I thought, well, wait a minute, this could be a book. And then it was joining Sue's memoir group that helped me start to stitch the pieces together and helped me start to see the shape. And helped me figure out what the hell I was doing. I didn't know, as Sue was saying earlier, what my dramatic question was. I had to come to that gradually, and it shifted and changed. And that's all part of the discovery as well.
Huh. So, Sue, what would be the difference then between memoir and autobiography? The story of a life versus the story of a moment of a life?
Exactly. Well, not necessarily the moment of a life, but a particular time in a life, a particular theme in one's life. And that theme might take 20 years. Thinking about Educated, we could talk about a couple of memoirs, and that might be a great way to illustrate this. So Educated is Tara Westover's story about growing up in a kind of a prepper family in, I think, Utah. Her parents didn't believe in interaction with the state or federal government, right? So she wasn't registered as being born. She wasn't registered for school. She was homeschooled till she was, I think, 12 or 13. And the whole book is about, she ended up, I think, with a PhD and a couple of postdoc certificates. I mean, it's an amazing story. Compelling. Oh my God, I read that like a novel. It was just, I gobbled it up. That's over a long span, right? But the theme is about getting an education, and in so many ways, in so many fronts. And then you think about Cheryl Strade's Wild, which is the story of her walking the Pacific Crest Trail over a couple of months, right, by herself. That's the trail that kind of summits, I think, between the watersheds in the Rocky Mountains. She started in California and ended up in, I think, Oregon. And that story pulls in all kinds of backstory, why she was there, the trouble her life was in, and so on. But it really takes place over quite a short time, and yet the transformation is absolutely, again, it's a period, it's a theme, it's a period of transformation. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of good examples, but in neither case is it about, I was born in 1965 and, I went to school, and it's not all the quotidian details of a life. It's all organized around, as Heidi said, a central question, a central exploration, a burning issue for the writer and the one who was living that life.
So Becoming by Michelle Obama, that's more of an autobiography.
I haven't read Becoming, so I can't say.
Sort of starts at the beginning and it goes to the end, and talks about her life before meeting Obama and her journey through his presidency, and then it ends because he's not president anymore. So that's like an autobiography, right? It's like a detail of it started here, and here I am, the end.
Is it told sort of chronologically?
Yep, very much chronologically, life? But very much a story. I mean, it reads, if you didn't know that it was true, it reads as an interesting story of a person's life.
Right. I guess my question would be, is there a central theme to it? Is it about how her whole life prepared her to be Obama's wife? That's the thing, right? A memoir has memoir has a theme, an overarching, transformative time in the person's life, whereas an autobiography is really quite episodic, right? It's this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And by the end, you may understand a person's life as a whole, but you don't necessarily understand something that was really deep for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think a lot of the autobiographies start out as this is what happened, and I think as it goes along, it almost gets into memoir, doesn't it? Because I think the author's almost discovering things about themselves as they go.
Yeah, I couldn't speak to that. I know that certainly the process of somebody delving into a memoir often begins sort of much more wide-ranging and then centers in on what the real point of this process is for this person.
Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't get someone who would join these workshops who necessarily has a really boring life. Like, they wake up in the morning, they do their work, they go to bed, and then they relive the next day. It seems like you would have to have something that you want to write about, something that has happened to you in order to want to pursue this memoir.
I would say that if you're willing to go deep enough into your life, that everyone has at least one memoir in them. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes by the poet Ellen Bass, who says, every moment holds a poem. If you can't find the poem, you probably haven't gone deep enough into the moment. Mm-hmm. And I would say that around memoir, right? Every life holds at least one memoir. Often when people start writing memoirs, it turns out that there are two or three like sort of central themes that they could explore, and they have to narrow it down and choose just one. There's some beautiful memoirs out there. One of my favorites to talk about is how to live alone in a king-size bed, which is the story of a year just after a woman's divorce. So the inciting incident is she kicks her husband out. He's an addicted gambler. He was supposed to have given it up, and then she discovers he's been gambling again. And so she's penniless. She doesn't have a husband. She's got 2 kids, I think, under 5. And it's the story of, her next year. It's very small, right? How do you manage being a working mom and the kids? It's something that so many of us have gone through, but she found a way to explore the central transformative question for her over that year. So no, you don't have to have a brilliant, sparkling, amazing life. I think almost every life has a memoir in it. I want to go back to something you were talking to Heidi about the courage to put something out there, to put a whole memoir out there. But I want to say that Heidi has actually published some standalone pieces from her memoir.
Oh, nice.
Already. Yeah.
Great.
So,
can you tell us about that, Heidi?
Sure. One of the pieces was pulled from the memoir. I turned it at Sue's suggestion into second person. And it was a story of my mother's first day in a nursing home. It was a fraught time for her and for me. And the chapter comes in my memoir somewhere in the first third, I think. So I pulled that out because it seemed to have standalone qualities, and rewrote it in second person because it seemed to beg for that, and got it published in the Los Angeles Review of Books.
And congratulations.
Thank you. And I think I think I have quite a few more essays in my memoir that I could pull out, little standalone pieces that share a fragment of a dilemma or a situation. And it is a lot of fun to do that.
Yeah, and this thing, the reason I wanted to make that point is that I think it's sort of titrating the experience, right? You're getting small pieces of your memoir out into the world and getting a reaction to those, having some success with those. And then it's not as scary to well, I don't know. I guess it's always terrifying, but I think it's not as scary to put the whole thing out there.
Okay, so Heidi, when you started on this journey, did you believe that you really wanted to make a book, or were you just kind of curious about memoir and thought, well, I'll just give this a try, see what comes out of it?
I was really curious about my life situation. I was curious to make sense of it. I couldn't make sense of it. And so I started by writing in my journal, and later I started writing those free fall pieces. And then as I had a decent amount of material to work with, the material started to talk to me and said, this is part of something larger than an essay that you could shape that will probably touch some other people, because a lot of people go through some of the things that I was writing about.
And then why did you start journaling?
When did I?
Or why?
Why? That's an interesting question. I think probably because it's been the same theme for the whole of my life. I was trying to make sense of the family situation I was in. I was always wrestling with it. And I found from journaling that I would gain perspective and peace of mind and insights, and I would be less judgmental, and I would be less hurt, and I would be less confused. So it all worked to that effort of going from confusion into something that made sense to me. And it took a lot of time to and then you move into the whole situation of writing craft, right? Like you figure out some of these things with your life, and then what you start to wrestle with is how to write it in a way that makes it accessible to others. And then in that process, it becomes even more accessible to you. So it just keeps spinning and growing.
It's like that snowball rolling down the mountain, getting bigger and bigger.
Exactly.
You probably have to be Canadian to relate to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this time that we're going through right now with COVID, one of the things that we've been talking about quite a lot is encouraging people to journal, encouraging young people to journal, encouraging youth. I'm talking about high school age kids, sort of grade 9 to grade 12. There is a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of trepidation. They're missing out on such key socializing that happens at that age. And I guess, Sue, would you think that memoir would be something that might help them with their anxiety?
I don't know that I would be recommending memoir for anxious teens. Journaling, I think, is phenomenal. Well, I think journaling is phenomenal basically for everybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like having a conversation with the safest person you possibly can, right? The person in your journal is going to, the ears of your journal are going to accept absolutely everything you pour into them without judgment. They're just going to hold it. It's going to be a place to put it. Again, just a quick diversion into the medical research into expressive writing. It's been shown that when people journal or write about what distresses and dismays them, it improves both their physical and their mental well-being. They've done all kinds of experiments with people with depression and anxiety, and the results are significant every single time. So I would absolutely recommend journaling for anxious teens. I also, I've been thinking. Sorry, I'm stumbling here. A couple of years ago, I was thinking of offering a writing group for teens with anxiety. And this was, of course, before COVID and it was going to be an in-person group. And I put it out there, I advertised it, and I only had one brave teen sign up. And when I thought about it, it just made so much sense, right? Like, even really confident people are scared to join a writing group and to write in front of others. So, of course, it's just going to make anxious teens more anxious. But I've been playing with the idea of doing it on Zoom, where teens could leave their screens off and have an adopted pen name, right? So that nobody would know who they really are, but they would have the opportunity to write their stories and receive feedback in that AWA method that validates, the writer and their story. And I'm thinking it might be really effective because, as we were talking about earlier, when you write in community with people and you hold their stories tenderly and without judgment, you come to care for each other so deeply, and you come to feel accepted in a whole other way, in a way that just doesn't happen in real life.
Yeah, I can see that.
So the short answer is, I guess, for anxious teens, journaling, if possible, journaling, or writing together in an AWA way, but probably not memoir.
Okay. Maybe memoir will come after the pandemic is over and they can look back on it. And write their memoir of what they were doing and how they were feeling about it at that time.
Exactly. Well, again, as you think about, so memoir is about a particular period in your life, and there's a transformative aspect to it. You are a different person at the end of that story than you were when you started. So with that lens, you can look at your whole life and say, where did I change? What did I get involved with? What happened to me? What challenges did I face where I was different at the end? Hopefully better, right? Hopefully stronger, more resilient, wiser, with a new understanding.
Mm-hmm. Heidi, how did you feel when you first started realizing that this was something that you were going to do in a very serious way? Because 5 years of doing it means that you are taking this very seriously. This isn't some passing fling.
Right.
Were you feeling really vulnerable and exposed?
I was, and then I wasn't, because I was always telling myself, well, it's first draft, and the advice to memoirists in starting out is always to put it all down. And I think you gather courage as you continue to do that. And, of course, you're continuing to read other people's memoirs, like Educated, where there's deep vulnerability. So you're writing and you're continuing to have this mindset that you're not going to hold anything back. And then before you know it, you finish the darn thing. And at that point, you're so invested in it, and you've grown so much from having done it, and you understand so much more about the genre of memoir that it just doesn't seem any other way forward but to put it out there.
Mm-hmm. So what is your plan moving forward with your memoir? Are you done yet?
I've done my first draft, which is some of it has been worked over and over, so some of it's polished and a lot of it isn't. It's currently out with an editor for a professional edit, somebody who knows nothing about my story, which is an important next step for me. And I'm actually waiting to hear back from her today, tomorrow, or Friday.
Oh.
And find out what kind of feedback she's recommending.
How are you feeling about that?
I am on tenterhooks.
Well, I guess
Exciting,
you're lucky. You're lucky because it's exciting, but you're also lucky because you have an AWA group that's going to be there for you.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, it is exciting. It's been a long time coming, and I feel that what I'm saying in my memoir has a universal appeal. I think there are a lot of people that will resonate with similar things that I'm dealing with, and I think that for me is the end game, is to reach out and touch other people. And when I got that article published in Los Angeles Review of Books, the feedback that came back from so many people was, this happened to me too, and I felt this too, and oh, thank you for sharing this. And I'm so grateful for not being the only one to have gone through something like this, or I'm about to go through this. Thank you for that. And there's no greater gift, right, Sue? I mean, there's just no better reason to tackle the vulnerability and put the story out there.
Yeah, when you realize that your story has touched somebody else, reassured them, helped them feel that that they're not so alone. It's incredibly validating, right? It's like my story has worth to somebody else, not just me. It's got worth out there in the world. It does good work. I think it's really important.
Well, ladies, we're running out of time. It always happens on Freshwaves. Sue, what's on the roster for summer workshops in writing?
Actually, in the summer, I usually kind of scale way back. I'm still working with regular clients. I have private clients, so that will continue through the summer. I'm not actually doing any workshops, but people over the course of the summer are signing up for the novel approach that begins in September. Like it's like back to school for adults.
What is the novel approach? Is that writing a novel?
It's the program we do for writing that year of writing a book-length manuscript, right?
Okay.
So my partner, James, does a novel approach to fiction. So that really is a novel. And I do a novel approach to memoir.
I see. Okay. Well, that sounds intriguing. So if people really want to get started on memoir writing or even writing their next novel, they've got the summer to think about it. Start putting the pieces together. And then in September, they can really get into it. Now, are you hoping if the pandemic has ebbed, are you looking at maybe doing in-person workshops again, or are you sticking to Zoom?
I think I will always do a novel approach on Zoom now. It's just been so good. It's allowed people who've wanted to study with me for years but weren't geographically close to be able to do that. So, Brenda, I think I lead these one-day retreats at my country home. Mm-hmm. So when we're back to being able to do things in person, I'll probably do one of those a month. It's a full-day writing retreat for a single day, and it includes lunch, and it's a lovely group of people. Mm-hmm. But so I'll split those. Some of those I'll continue to do on Zoom, as I am now. Some of those I'll do in person, like I say, probably once a month. But I think the workshops that are targeted towards a particular kind of writing output, I'm probably going to keep doing those on Zoom. It's allowed me to write with people from Ireland to Hawaii to California to British Columbia to Florida. It's just been such a gift.
Yeah, that's one of the good things about COVID has been the connection with the world.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, Heidi, I wish you the best of luck. I hope it all goes really well for you. And Sue, thank you for joining us today. We always learn something from you every time we have you on the show, and we enjoy your input.
Thank you, Brenda. It's always a treat to be here. I love the wide-ranging conversations.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thanks.
It was great.
And Heidi, will you come back on the show in a little while and let us know what's going on with your memoir?
I would love to.
Perfect. That's great. Well, that's it for Fresh Waves this week. Join us again next week for more Fresh Waves.